Welcome, everybody. I am here with Senator Kipp, Colorado State Legislature, who previously was in the House and prior to that was on the school board. So, boy, has she been doing an awful lot of thankless work for everybody for quite a while. But welcome aboard.
Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it.
All right, so what led you into first the school board and then the House and then the Senate?
Well, so I was fortunate enough to have twins back in 1998, and so that led to me being that mom, who was always at the schools and doing the school stuff and volunteering on all the committees, because when you have two kids in school at the same time, you have more flexibility with that. And by the time I was serving on, however many different committees, somebody called me when my kids were in the 8th grade, and they said, "Hey, you ever thought of running for school board?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I thought maybe when my kids were older, they were older and I better get on it." So I did that, and then the reason I decided to join the legislature is because serving on the school board made me understand the desperate need for funding in our public schools, right? We're just so underfunded and the need is so high, and so, really got on there to work on that. But fortunately, when I'm in the legislature, I get to care about all the issues, so really happy about that.
All right, so you'll be term limited, I don't know what, at the end of your next election or whatever.
No, actually, so I served 3 terms in the House, and then my senator was term limited, so I ran for the Senate. So this is my first year in the Senate. So I could serve this 4 years that I've been elected to, and I could potentially do one more term. So I guess you're right, that's one more term, but that'd be 8 years. That's a lot.
So when you get to that point and you're done and you're looking back, what are the 2 or 3 things you really hope to be able to say, because I was there, either these things did happen or these things did not happen, whichever way you look on it. But the 2 or 3 that would make you feel all that pain and effort and time was worth it.
Well, on the subject of education funding, which leads more broadly to the subject of funding and Tabor, I'm really hoping that we can figure out how to move forward with our state budget, because we are extremely hamstrung under Tabor, frankly, and under how we have to operate as a state. And I think that we need to put some changes into place to make sure that our schools are adequately funded, and so many other things that we're doing are well funded. So that's a really important one. But I think the next thing is civil rights, right? I mean, it doesn't really matter if you're talking about, well, it does, but I mean, if all of the rights are important. The rights for all of our LGBTQ population, the rights for our immigrant population, the rights for, everybody should have a level of civil rights, racial equality, all of the stuff where we need, especially when things are so scary right now at the federal level, we want to make sure that people here in Colorado are protected and feel that they are protected. So I think those are the biggest buckets. There's a lot of other stuff, that we get to work on here, and gun violence prevention. I seem to be veering into that space more than ever this year. Abortion rights, reproductive rights, all of that kind of stuff is really important too. But I'd say those are some of the biggest issues we see as a state.
Is there definitely a reason to worry in other states? Is there any reason in Colorado on abortion rights and reproductive rights?
Yes. I mean, we're doing what we can in Colorado, right? Our legislature, we have strong Democratic majorities. We are firmly committed to making sure everybody has good reproductive rights, really great reproductive rights here in Colorado. We're actually one of those magnet states because we have so many red states around us. People are coming here to receive care. But I am very concerned about what's going on at the federal level and about them deciding that, I am very concerned that we have people who refuse to stand up for the American people in Congress right now. And I am worried that they could be led down a path to eliminate things at the federal level, which supersedes the state level, and then we're sunk, right? We put it into our state constitution, but that only is good so long as federal law and the federal constitution don't preempt it. So yeah, I just encourage everybody to reach out federally and tell your federal folks that this is not okay.
All right, so going back to education, let's say you come into the Capitol on Monday, and the President of the Senate, Speaker of the House, and Governor Polis are there saying, "You've just been phenomenal on this. So you get one bill, you write it, they'll pass it to improve education." What would that bill be?
Ooh, that's a really good question. wow, there's a lot to choose from there. Sometimes we want to have really broad titles in cases like this, like concerning the Colorado statutes, and then we can put everything we want under it. Our funding in Colorado is inequitable. We, in the 2023 School Finance Act, we passed 2 adequacy studies. And those adequacy studies basically show that we're probably $4 billion short of where we should be in order to offer our K-12 students an adequate level of education throughout the state, a thorough and uniform. Ultimately, we're very likely to have to go to the voters ultimately and ask for additional funding, but there are ways that we can do that. For instance, we could go and ask the voters for something we call a uniform mill levy. That was where we were going as a state before we adopted Tabor back in 1992, or it was 94. I think it was 1992 that we adopted Tabor, and before that we were on a track to have everybody in the state set at 40 mills for funding our schools in terms of property taxes. Because what happens with your local property taxes is everything that we pay locally gets into a pot and then the state has to backfill the rest. And that's why the state funding is very much affected by how much local funding there is. And so I think what we're going to have to do at some point is go to the voters and ask them to go back to a uniform mill levy, because we never got there. What happened was Gallagher and Tabor interacted badly with one another, and so there are some districts in our state that are paying hardly anything in terms of their per pupil revenue in terms of mills, and then some that are capped at 27 mills. And I think there's probably a sweet spot that we can get to, where we bring everybody to the same level again and make sure that everybody is putting an equal effort into funding our schools, so there aren't some areas that are disproportionately impacted. And I think we could probably increase revenue with that. Another thing that I would love to see, and unfortunately a lot of this has to go to the voters, we can't just do it because we're the only state in the country that has Tabor, which ties the hands of the legislature, that would be to get a progressive income tax, right? So to send to the voters a way to get better funding, because people don't know this, but Tabor, in addition to letting you vote on all of your tax increases, it also mandates that we have a flat income tax, which is regressive, and it harms the people, in the lowest, who make the least money the most. So it would be really great if we were able to get something. And I think, again, there's a compromise to be found, because Coloradans have never failed to vote for something where they're thinking they're taxing other people to help themselves. You're right. This thing is going to help us. We want to tax other people to do it, right? Like take, for instance, when we passed the nicotine tax to fund UPK, Universal Preschool, or Universal Preschool. Well, that is what is happening. We are put money into something that you tax something like that because you hope it's going to decrease, right? But you need to maintain that stable level of funding, because now you're relying on that funding. And actually, the numbers are showing that we have some declining tobacco rates. But again, Colorado, they approved marijuana because they thought it was going to help school funding, which, by the way, they were misled. It didn't really actually do that. They agreed to do sports betting so we could fund our water plan. We agreed to do this, nicotine funding. But if they tax somebody else, they're always willing to do it. So we can find a sweet spot in there where we can find a level of graduated income tax that would lower the rates of most people, but for the most wealthy people, they would pay some higher rates, and frankly, they can afford it. So I think that there is potentially a compromise there to be had at some point that we could get voter approval on.
So I thought there was an initiative 1 or 2 elections ago to bring in a progressive income tax.
Yes, a progressive income tax. Yeah, I think that was part of one of the that we tried to get onto the ballot, and I think that was the year that COVID hit, and it really hampered our efforts at getting signatures to get it on the ballot. So there's 2 ways to get something onto the ballot. There's going through the citizen initiative process. The citizen initiative process, anybody can go to the title board, request a title, go and get probably 150, 200,000 signatures, depending on stuff, and get something onto the ballot. The other way is to have it referred from the legislature. If you're able to get something referred to the legislature, that requires 2/3 in the House and 2/3 in the Senate. Sadly, we are about 1 vote shy of that in each chamber right now. But, the way things are going, that could change.
Well, for what it's worth, it would mean my taxes going up, but I'm all in favor of it because I owned a software company, and so talk about needing an educated populace.
Right. Well, I think that's the thing that not everybody understands, and I appreciate that you do, but a rising tide, floats all boats, right? If we have more people who have more education and are able to survive in society better, ultimately it benefits us because it benefits us all, because the costs of not doing that is like if you don't have, like if this Medicaid thing goes through at the federal level, which I mean, and we have fewer people on Medicaid, you know what that means? That means we have more people showing up in emergency rooms without any form of insurance and our hospitals potentially going under, right? We have, when you don't educate everybody, you have people who are maybe making decisions on a less informed basis. When you are not able to, like we just cut funding to food banks because we have a $1.2 billion hole right now in our state budget. Now, I don't know exactly what that's going to look like when we get to the March revenue forecast in maybe 2-3 weeks, but I'm hoping that that number looks better by then, because those are a lot of important programs that we have to cut. I mean, we just cut, I think, $3 million for disabled children who are on Medicaid. I mean, things are not looking good in the state of Colorado, and yet our voters, I mean, they don't necessarily understand that when they vote to give $350 million of state budget money to local law enforcement, which, by the way, is already funded, that takes that money out of the state budget, and now we're going to have to figure out how to pay for that on top of this like $1.2 billion hole we have to fill.
I was blogging a lot, 15, 20 years ago, and then I took a hiatus because my company got so busy, and I'm back on it now. But back then, there was a fair amount of discussion of actually calling for a constitutional convention, because between Tabor and all these specific allocated funds set here, there, and everywhere, you guys now have what's really a Rube Goldberg device. And I know it came within a vote or two back then. Is there any discussion now of holding a constitutional convention?
You mean at the federal level? Because that's the only
state level.
I have not heard of a state constitutional convention. This is actually the first I've heard of that. I didn't know that was really a thing, and I suppose we could. I would have to look into it more and understand, how does that work and where would your votes lie? Because we have the minority of people in the House and the Senate are Republicans, but they are very ardently, generally in favor of keeping Tabor in place. They think it's been great for the state. They think people should get larger tax returns. And I mean, that's great. We can have that difference of opinion, but I would want to make sure that if we did have a constitutional convention, that we weren't opening up ourselves to something that would be really problematic.
Well, the interesting thing about it, yeah, it came within a couple of votes, and I had Brandon Schaefer, who was president of the Senate at the time, said that if he could have gone back 4 years, they were close enough, and it was a couple of them said, no, that takes too long. And then they're sitting there 4 years later going, we would have been done by now with it. But they weren't that worried about anything too extreme going in, because the level of approval needed to accept the Constitution is pretty heavy also, on the new one.
Yeah, but I mean, can I just say though that, even if it has to go to the voters for approval, there are interests that would not be aligned with, say, my interests, that would put a lot of money into it. And so a lot of times when you have these campaigns, you also have to make sure that they're going to be funded. So could I, even come up with a citizens initiative and get, either of those two things I mentioned on the ballot? Well, maybe I could, but once, let's say you get them on the ballot, which is, a costly endeavor in of itself. It usually costs like $1 million to put something on the ballot, because you have to get all the petitions done and do all of the groundwork there. But on top of that, you then have to run the campaign to make sure it passes once you get there, and you have to be ready to counter all the money. That's why the legislature, frankly, ended up in a really, in my opinion, poor deal when we were brought back into special session in August and told, oh, well, we just need to cut people's property taxes, and even though we already had an agreement, we're going to make you cut them more, and that's going to harm our counties, our human services, and it also costs us state money, because now, there's more money we have to backfill. It wasn't a very good deal, in my opinion, but people were scared off because other people had put some very damaging, potentially, ballot measures onto the ballot and had offered to withdraw them if we held that special session and got rid of them. So, when you have people...
Yeah, that was flat out blackmail.
It was awful.
Legal blackmail, but it was blackmail.
Right. And I was like more in the camp of, well, let's just fight these because these are going to be draconian cuts and people are going to, come out against it. Let's take that chance because we don't need to lose the funding we already have, because I know it hurt my county. I know it hurt counties around the state, but unfortunately it passed. And so now everybody gets lower tax rates. And I understand that's important, especially in these times where we've suffered such high rates of inflation that people are feeling very picked on in terms of, well, you're raising our rates. It's like, well, we're not actually raising the tax rates. It's just that the value has gone up, but not everybody understands how that works. So it's a hard balance.
Well, speaking, I'm not speaking for everybody else that has a fair amount of money, but speaking for two of them, me and my wife, yeah, at the higher ends, we can definitely afford a bit more taxes.
Yeah, well, and that's another thing. I mean, so I don't know if you remember the Healthy Meals Initiative that was on the ballot. Oh, I think it was in the 2022 election, right? And I would go knocking on people's doors, and people would either say, I didn't need that $750 cash back. I would rather we paid our teachers. Or I would get like, oh, that Healthy Meals thing on the ballot, tax the rich. We like that because we want people to be able to children to be able to get fed, right? And the amazing thing about that program, and I don't know if you're aware of it, but is that the utilization is so much more than they ever anticipated. So we just know that the levels of need were just higher than anybody knew.
All right, so new subject.
Okay.
What's the most impactful steps the state can take right now in the environment?
Oh my gosh, it's a great question. We just need to be our progress. We need to make sure that the laws that we have put in place are being properly enforced, right? I know there's a lot of concern that, we put these things in the rule makings have been slow and it's taking a long time to get where we want to go. So I would want to start with making sure that we're enforcing our existing laws. Unfortunately, that was another thing that happened last year. Same kind of blackmail, frankly. People people with very deep pockets put on some approved for some ballot measures that would have been extremely damaging. They would have basically repealed all of the progress we've made in the environmental space since I've been in the legislature in 2019, which was like the first year in a long time that we had a trifecta, the Democrats at the House, the Senate, and the governor's level. And so we made a deal that, we'll agree not to do this and you'll agree not to do that, and we'll just call a truce for the next 3 years. We're in, 2 more years, I guess, now. I'm basically the remainder of the Polis administration. So, we're continuing to do the things we can. There's people who would like to be bolder and do a cap and trade program here at the state level. I know they've done something similar in Washington State. They've done some big things in New York. I don't know how that translates in what we are able to do at the state level because, again, our hands are very clearly tied by Tabor. But yeah, I know I live in Fort Collins. I know my community has been hard hit with, poor air quality, and we need to figure out how to move forward. I'm not going to pretend I'm an environmental expert, but I like to listen to smart people. And so I think I would ask my smart people that question and say, well, if we could have one thing we wanted, what would we do? Because I don't know the best answer. We've tried putting on all kinds of regulations and everything, and I've expressed frustration to the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. It's like, why aren't we rolling these things out faster? Why are we not making progress? Why does it feel like, every time we do something that it's not being adequately enforced? So I would think.
And what did they say when you asked them that?
Oh, well, we're working towards it. We've got rule makings. We've got, they're trying to work with people, and I think sometimes we've worked with people enough and they lag so much, right? In terms of the air quality permits that they're doing, and it just takes them so much time to do anything. And so, a few years ago we gave them, more people and more resources, but then it was taking them time to staff up, and it's just one of those hard problems where we have to push them to say, hey, these laws are on the books. Why are we not, issuing maximal fines? Well, we're trying to work with them to make sure that they're going to comply, and we don't want it, right? So I think, us pushing on them is probably one of the best, most effective things we can do to make sure that we're having the laws that we've already passed enforced, and then seeing what else we can do and, explaining to folks what it's going to take. It doesn't help when a lot of the stuff we've done over the last few years, or a couple years at least, is worked in concert with the Inflation Reduction Act, which was a federal level piece, which had all kinds of tax incentives and credits. So to encourage people to have more renewable energy and cleaner energy and all that good stuff. But unfortunately, a lot of that is now being revoked and repealed. I mean, for heaven's sakes, the electrical vehicle chargers that are in front of federal buildings are saying, well, they're up and running, but we paid all this money for them, but we want you to decommission them, right? I mean, what does that do? Does it help anybody but Elon Musk because he has his own charging system for Tesla? Is the whole objective of the federal government to get rid of any of the protections we put in place unless they benefit the wealthiest people in our country? I'm really concerned about that. So I don't mean to be a downer on it, but I think, also we have a strong Attorney General here, fortunately, who's done a lot to try and fight back against what I believe are unconstitutional legal actions of this administration when it comes to not proceeding with giving out the money that our Congress has already approved.
Yeah. All right, I've just got two more questions for you, and I hope they're shorter ones. 14 years ago, we were just dead even a purple state.
Yeah.
How in 14 years, I'm not complaining, but how in 14 years did we go from being dead even a purple state to a really strongly blue state? And is it possible that, with what's going on right now, in another 4 years, we bounce back to purple?
Yes, and yes. Every cycle is different politically, right? We have, sometimes you have people who are up for election who are in harder seats, and we have times people who are in safer seats. I think, our 2026 election here in Colorado is going to be a challenge. I mean, this year we lost 3 of our seats in the state house. We kept even in the state senate, but they flipped a seat and we flipped a seat, which means we're still at our 23 votes in the senate, and now they're down to, I think it's 39 in the house, because we were at 42. We were at 43. Anyway, my memory is obviously not that good, but we lost 3 in the House and we maintained in the Senate, but flipping 1 in each direction. So, there are some seats that are a whole lot tighter, but I think with all that's happening at the federal level, I'm hoping that we can certainly get our message out that we are here to protect our most vulnerable communities and make sure that people have those civil rights protections and all the rights that we can give them in Colorado. A lot of fear with what's going on right now, and we just need to make sure that people are feeling okay. But I know that there is a lot of there's a lot of challenging seats up in the next election, and I think it depends on that will also end up being somewhat of a coattails election, right? We've got new governor being elected that year. We've got Congress will be in flux. We'll have a lot going on. We'll have Secretary of State, Treasurer, and Attorney General, which are looking like they're going to be really competitive races also. So I think it depends on how people are feeling at the time, and if they feel like, we as Democrats are representing them adequately, and how they feel about the Republicans. And I think what I fear the most is that there is so much different information that people are listening to, that we no longer operate from the same set of facts and draw our conclusions. We're operating from different set of facts, that people are deliberately misleading people at times and maybe accidentally at other. But at any rate, we have 2 different sets of facts that people are basing their decisions on. And I find that troubling. And I hope that people will do their due diligence in getting information from good places.
Yeah, that's, it's interesting. I think a lot of people go, every statewide seat is Democratic, and most of them are by a pretty good margin. The legislature is strongly Democratic, and I think you're right that we're still at the point that on any given election that could flip back to, if not red, at least, dead even purple. But I think most people are not aware of that.
Right. And I mean, we're only 1 election away ever from that. And I think that the Senate would be more likely to flip than the House, right? But a lot of people thought it was going to flip 2 years ago, too. But that didn't happen. I'm just hoping. And we actually gained ground that year. And here's the thing. It's like after that election, when the Democrats gained ground to an unprecedented level in the House and got the supermajority, and we got 23 seats, a lot of people had predicted that the Republicans might at least take back the Senate, and they didn't even come close. They lost ground. And then after that election, they all got together and said, Well, clearly we weren't conservative enough. They're just not reading the room properly. I mean, they aren't. And that's what you get, I think, when you have people who are representing probably the reddest districts in the state, who are representing people in this chamber and the chamber, over the House chamber, and feeling like they are, from what they're hearing from their people, is that they are representing them. And I do believe that most people in the legislature, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, believe that they feel like they're representing their own districts. But, I would keep in mind that, even though I'm in a fairly safe Democratic district, I represent Republicans too. And even though my Republican colleagues represent mostly Republicans, they also have Democrats in their district.
Yeah.
And we need to keep that in mind, because when people get tired of having their voices stifled, they're gonna rise up.
Yeah. All right, so do you have any closing thoughts for everybody?
No, you let me get them all out, I think. I just appreciate the opportunity to chat with you, and anytime.
Thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time, and you have a wonderful day. It looks like a beautiful weekend out there.
Thank you.